Okay, I'm really pleased to say that we have Rabbi Kaplan with us now, and we've got him for a little longer than we normally would. Good morning, Rabbi Kaplan, and happy Tu B'Shvat to you.
Good morning, and a happy Tu B'Shvat to you, Martin, and all of our listeners across the GTA, the province of Ontario, and beyond. I know we have an international audience because I get feedback sometimes from places as far away as Australia. With the internet, the world has become a very, very small place. And truth be told, not only are we simulcasting or broadcasting on the radio together, but I got you streaming live on my Facebook as well.
Wow. It's an amazing world we live in.
Yeah, it's an amazing world, at least potentially. It's also an amazingly messed up world these days.
I got to agree with that too.
But we have fantastic potential, and this is one of the things that Rosh Hashanah Le'ilanot, the New Year for trees, is all about. Truth be told, no fruits grow today. No fruits are at least not in the land of Israel, which is the origin of the concept of Chamisha Asar B'Shvat or Tu B'Shvat, the New Year for trees. What does happen though is that the trees begin to come back to life, subterraneously, that is, like beneath the surface, sometimes many, many meters beneath the ground. The tips of the roots of the tree's roots begin to come back to life. You know, I want to say something which is probably very, very simple, but it's a good idea to repeat this because a lot of people don't think very much about how trees live and how they produce fruit. The tree essentially hibernates for several months a year, and with the exception of the etrog, that is the most extraordinary tree and entirely unique, the beautiful fruit that we take on Sukkot as per biblical ordination. With the exception of the etrog, trees have seasons. And the meaning of a season is that there's a time when the tree is alive, and the tree has the equivalent of plasma coursing through the equivalent of its veins. And when that happens, when the tree begins to come to life, if it's a fruit-bearing tree, it will give forth blossoms. Those blossoms eventually will give way to bulbs, and from those bulbs, fruit will be born. And the tree continues to take its nourishment from the soil and the water that's available to it. And of course, if there's no rain or if there's not fertile soil, you're not going to have very beautiful fruits. And the tree sends life, its lifeblood, through the branches, and it feeds the fruit. So the fruit continues to grow, and the sunlight plays a great role as well. So between soil, sun, and water, and the tree is able to produce beautiful fruit. And at a certain point, the tree shuts down. And when that happens, the fruit, and for that matter, the foliage, isn't getting any more vitality. And what happens is that we have a hibernating tree, which is for all practical purposes no longer actively alive. The fruit, which is no longer being nourished by the sap or that which comes through the tree, begins it stops growing. So it's no longer alive, and because the stem, which is like the umbilical cord for the fruit, isn't active, it eventually dries up. And if you don't pick the fruit at a certain point, the stem will become so brittle it'll break and the fruit will fall down. By that time, the fruit has been inactive, inert, or dead for quite a bit of time, and by the time it falls off, it's most likely rotten. So what happens is we need to get to the fruit before it turns rotten. After the fruit has already finished its growth cycle, after the stem is no longer active and has become brittle enough for us to easily pick the fruit, but not so brittle that it breaks under the weight of the fruit, and then you have, as we said, a fruit that has begun its decomposition. That's basically the life and the story of the tree. And every single year, different trees have different seasons. But in the land of Israel, the hibernation of the tree is over on the 15th day of Shvat, and the tree begins to come back to life beneath the surface. Sometimes it takes a couple of weeks. For example, talk about the almond, the fastest growing fruit We see nuts as a fruit, and from a Torah perspective. So the fastest growing fruit is the almond, 21 days to be precise, and that has a lot of symbolism in Judaism. 3 weeks after the tree comes back to life, the blossoms already appear, and in a very, very short amount of time, the bulb emerges and the blossom turns into an almond. And then there are trees that take several weeks, and then there are trees that take several months. But eventually, everybody's blossoms will fall off, the bulbs will appear, and the fruit will grow. All of this, the process begins on Rosh Hashanah Le'ilanot. So whatever has grown in the past, by now should have been picked, and we're ready for a new season. The upshot is, Martin, that the Rosh Hashanah of trees does not actually focus on the fruit of the tree. It focuses on the tree's potential to bring a new season of fruit. And so on Rosh Hashanah Le'ilanot, by and large, we celebrate not the actual growth or fruits, but rather the potential that God has endowed and invested within each and every single tree. And by virtue of that famous Deuteronomic verse that says, Ki ha'adam eitz hasada, which is found in the 20th chapter of Deuteronomy in the 19th verse, and as per its explanation, or the analysis of our sages on the 7th page of Masechet Ta'anit, we understand that the tree is not only a metaphor, but in fact an embodiment of what human life is supposed to be. And therefore, the Rosh Hashanah for trees is relevant and meaningful for each of us, and it is today that we take a hard look, not at the actual fruit we're producing, but the potential that God has given us.
Well, it seems that trees are very significant to us. We sing Eitz Chaim He, tree of life, and the rules of warfare to forbid the destruction of fruit-bearing trees, and in fact, in modern times, planting all the forests all over Israel, the early days and everything like that, how we value them, and I mean the original Green Line and everything, that where the trees went up to and stopped in those days. So certainly trees are something to celebrate.
I'm going to leave some of that the modern attribution at the door here. I'm not going to bring it in, and especially because the Green Line has nothing to do with trees. It was an armistice line that was drawn with a green pen, and it's one of the greatest disasters of modern day Israel. There was nothing reasonable or wise or tenable about a green line that was drawn between countries that attacked a province which once used to be called Palestine, as it was a British or Turkish protectorate, a country that never existed. It didn't have its.
What I was told at that time was when the Jews who settled there, where they redeemed the land and planted things on. You could tell where the border was, because that's where all the greenness of everything they.
I think Martin, at best that's a fable. I'm pretty sure I heard this from numerous historians that the proverbial Green Line was an armistice line that was drawn for a ceasefire, and there wasn't a war with a country called Palestine. The Jews living in Palestine were called Palestinian Jews. Arabs living in Palestine were called Palestinian Arabs. And for that matter, whoever was living in this province, it was just a name of a province that was controlled by foreign governments, as it had been controlled by foreign governments for 1900 years, Martin. That is so telling and compelling that there has never, ever in history been a country called Palestine. Never. This is the name that Hadrian imposed upon the country of Israel, or as it was sometimes called, Judea, the origin of the word Jew. And it was done to shame and embarrass the Jewish people. It was done to denigrate our history. But there is no such thing as Palestinian currency. There's no such thing as Palestinian monarchy. There's no such thing as Palestinian custom or convention. All of this is invented. And Martin, in 1948, the Jewish people living in Israel, who made a decision to declare statehood, which was recognized by the United Nations and most of the world's superpowers at the time, even including the Soviet Union and the United States, They were attacked by 5 Arab armies.
Well,
they were not attacked.
This is all history. Let's get back on top.
You were the one who went. You were the one who went in that direction. So I'm
I'm
gonna hold you guilty.
The idea of trees is that the significance of it even in modern times. Anyways, well, I mean, like planting all the forests and everything, Canada Forest and things like that. People donated trees. I planted a tree in memory of my grandfather the first time I was in Israel.
But that, Martin, that's great, except that it has nothing to do with the Rosh Hashanah for trees.
No, I know.
Not only nothing, but absolutely nothing, because Rosh Hashanah for trees is for trees that were planted a significant amount of time ago, trees that are already vibrant, shall we say, and able to live on their own. It is about the fruits of the tree. And the Magen Avraham is very, very clear in Shulchan Aruch in his commentary, and he says that the Torah custom, and this is a Torah date, and it should be understood by everybody, that it is a Torah date that has its roots and its origins in Torah tradition, that this Torah date is based on the concept of fruit, the potential of a tree to produce fruit. We celebrate the tree that is able to produce fruit. Most of the trees that people plant that you're talking about are not fruit-bearing trees, but rather the concept of trees. And trees is great, and they're fantastic, and they're wonderful. And I'm a proponent of doing whatever we can to make our country, both in Israel and in Canada, more tree-filled. But that's not what Chamisha Asar B'Shvat or Rosh Hashanah Le'ilanot, Tu B'Shvat, whatever you want to call it. It's not what it's about. It's simply not about that. It is not about planting trees today. You can plant trees any day of the year, and it's no more or less meaningful when you plant a tree today. Today's focus is on the potential of the tree coming back to life and the eating or consumption of fruit. And in antiquity, where we didn't have refrigeration or the ability to travel with aviation, the fruits that were eaten were all dried fruits. And in today's day and age, where we have both aviation and remarkable ways to be able to import fruits from different parts of the world where the seasons are changed and different. So we have fresh fruit. So we should eat fresh fruit today. We can eat dried fruit today. We especially focus on the fruit of Eretz Yisrael because this is the story of the land of Israel, Martin. The land of Israel. The land of Israel, Eretz Yisrael, which has nothing to do with political considerations, which has nothing to do with anybody's borders or lines. It has to do with the sacred soil of Eretz Yisrael and the way we treat the fruit. We perform mitzvot with the fruit. We give something called truma, that's a tithe given to the Kohen, and we give something called meiser, that's a tithe given to the Levite. We take care of the poor, that's called meiser ani. All of these tithes are applicable to fruit that grows from trees planted in the sacred soil of the land of Israel. And that is why this day is meaningful. To co-opt this day as some kind of Jewish Earth Day or to connect it to the environment is fraudulent, inappropriate, and simply not true. And I don't think that we make our world a better place by promulgating untruths. I think we make our world a better place by living with truth. We should live with our own truth, being honest with ourselves. We should be honest with those around us. And we should live with the Torah truth, which is an objective truth. And Tu B'Shvat doesn't have to be meaningful because of any modern events, because the Torah is timeless. And its ideals are applicable in every time and in every place equally. And if there's a concept of Tu B'Shvat being Rosh Hashanah Le'ilanot, then it's relevant for us in every time and in every place, regardless of modern day conventions. I want to begin our focus by talking about the name of Tu B'Shvat in Torah literature itself. If you look in the Mishnah, you will see that the name shows up as Rosh Hashanah Le'ilan, not Le'ilanot. And there's a fascinating letter that is written to the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin by the Rebbe's father, who is the most illustrious rabbinic personality in Ukraine until he was arrested, brutally tortured, and eventually murdered by the Soviets. They basically destroyed him until he wasn't able to recover anymore, and tragically passed away in 1944. But this is written the year before the world changes forever with the Holocaust. In 1938, on Tu B'Shvat, he sends an incredible letter to his children, to the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin, and he focuses on the gematria, as Rav Levi Yitzchak the holy and brilliant father of the Rebbe would often do, weaving together the teachings of Kabbalah and fascinating gematriot and statements of our sages in real time. So he talks about the gematria of the word Ilan, and he says the Mishnah talks about Rosh Hashanah Le'ilan. So I don't think we can ignore the fact that it's called Rosh Hashanah Le'ilan, which means Rosh Hashanah for the tree, but at the same time it is known in the vernacular as the concept of Rosh Hashanah Le'ilanot. In English, adding the S at the end, the trees, or in Hebrew, from Ilan, adding a Vav and a Taf, making it from singular to plural. The Rebbe once noted the seeming discrepancy between the singular and the plural, and he drew a fascinating lesson for all of us, and that is that we, the Jewish people, are oftentimes compared to trees. One of the most famous comparisons is found in the 60th chapter of the prophecies of Isaiah, Yeshayahu HaNavi, where he talks about Ve'amech kulam tzadikim, your nation, says Isaiah, speaking in a prophetic tone. He says, your entire nation is all righteous. And you and I both know, Martin, that sometimes we see some of our brothers and sisters who are less than righteous. In fact, sometimes we look in the mirror and we can see a person who is less than righteous. So when we say V'amech kulam tzadikim, we really are speaking about the potential. It's a very, very much a Tu B'Shvat message. We each have the potential for righteousness. We each have the potential to be able to give to others, to provide luscious fruit and nourishment for others, to provide shade for others. And it is Netzer Matai, it's by virtue of being God's planting that we are considered virtuous in God's eyes. So we, the Jewish people, are compared to an Ilan. And we have the words of the Gemara in Masechet Chulin on page 99. Umazu ki gefen nimshala. Our sages tell us that our nation is metaphorized as a vine. And we know that grapes and wine and the vine are very important in Jewish imagery and in Jewish literature. And the Gemara says if you look at the vine, you see many details. There are roots and there's a vine, there are twigs, there's the large leaves or the foliage, and finally, of course, we have the actual the stem of the grapes, and then the grapes themselves. And this is said to be a metaphor for all kinds of people. We have fruity people who have a profound understanding, appreciation, and passion for Jewish history and life and spirituality, and they are considered to be the fruitiest amongst us, known in Hebrew in the vernacular as Talmidei Chachamim, students of our sages. We have people who support Talmidei Chachamim. They may not be wise, intuitive, or educated, but they provide support and they allow for an environment of learning and development of Jewish life. And then we have those who shield the profounder elements of our nation, and that sometimes could be seen as the leaves that provide the proper foliage, shielding that. We even have the roots and the stems. There are all kinds of people. They're all and each of us is unique. Each of us has a special role to play, as Moshe Rabbeinu talks about at the beginning of Parshat Nitzavim, on the last day of his terrestrial life. He says there's Roshechem, Shiftechem, there are the leaders of the Jewish people, and it goes down to sanitation and energy, Chotev Eitzecha and Shoev Memecha. And the point that Rebbe said is this: Rosh Hashanah Le'ilan, this day of Tu B'Shvat, is meaningful for us together as a nation. It is meaningful for us as individuals. And those two details, those two dimensions, are not inherently disparate, but rather one necessarily contributes to the other. We are only a strong nation when we are as strong as individuals. And we are only able to live as healthy individuals when we are part of a communal setting and understand that we are a piece of a much larger entity, namely a nation. Today is Rosh Hashanah Le'ilan. Today is Rosh Hashanah Le'ilanot. Today is a day for us to celebrate our potential as a nation, the nation of Am Yisrael. Today is our opportunity to focus on our own individual potential and ask ourselves questions, tough questions. Questions like, am I living as well as I can and should? Am I making enough of a contribution to others? Am I living a life that is filled with fruit and flavor, with delight and passion? And am I enriching the lives of those around me? Those are questions we
Good
have to
thing
ask
that-
about trees and about ourselves
Rabbi
in the
Kaplan,
image of
unfortunately, we are
trees.
out of time right now, but
Out
we
of
will be
time.
speaking
We're just
again
getting
tomorrow,
started here.
And we look forward to that. And thank you so much for joining us. And once again, happy Tu B'Shvat to you.
Martin, happy Tu B'Shvat. I hope that the things we talked about will uplift our listeners and the wider band of influence. I hope, Be'ezrat Hashem, that we will merit to see the potential of Am Yisrael fully realized with the coming of Mashiach and the ushering in of world peace in our time, B'mheira u'b'yameinu, speedily and in our days. I invite everybody to join me for a wonderful class tonight, which is called Forest for the Trees, an insightful study of the Gemara and Masechet Ta'anit and why Tu B'Shvat is so important to us all. L'chaim.
L'chaim.
And l'chaim to you. Thanks for joining.